When it comes to what your family eats and drinks, you know your choices matter. You're the expert because you know what fits your life. And getting it right starts with good information. That's why America's beverage companies are sharing more information about our ingredients at goodtoknowfacts.org. No spin, no judgments, just the facts straight from the experts for more than 140 beverage ingredients. Visit goodtoknowfacts.org.
We
are
Cultivate.
We are Cultivate.
Hello and welcome to Ye Olde Crime, where we discuss the funny, strange, and obscure crimes of yesteryear. I'm your host, Lindsay Valenti, and joining me today is a very special guest, Scott Wells. Scott Wells is a best-selling thriller and horror author known for weaving emotionally gripping, suspense-driven stories inspired by real-life events. With a gift for crafting high-stakes narratives that blur the lines between truth and illusion, Scott explores themes of deception, survival, and the hidden nature of reality. And today we'll be discussing his breakout novel, marked by The Ouija, which established him as a powerful voice in young adult horror, blending supernatural mystery with the emotional depth of adolescence. And from the book, when a group of friends stumble upon a brand new Ouija board, I just did it a different way that time. It's fine. A night of harmless fun spirals into a terrifying encounter with the unknown. Spooked by the pleas of restless spirit Peter, they burn the board, which reappears the next day without a trace of the fire. Haunted by cryptic warnings, unexplainable phenomena, and a message they can't ignore, the thrill-seekers find themselves tangled in ghostly vengeance. As the line between the natural and the supernatural blurs, they face a life-altering question. Can they trust the board, or are they unleashing a darkness far beyond their control? And with that, I'm going to welcome Scott to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about the story and my experience.
We got connected via Podmatch, and I was very pleased when I saw your message come into the inbox, and I read the book, and it was a very fun ride. So I was very excited to talk to you today.
Awesome. And you read it. That's fantastic. Thank you.
I try to do my authors the courtesy of reading their book before we discuss it, because I feel like we get to have a more in-depth discussion because I actually know what I'm talking about. So
Absolutely. And I love questions. So any question you have, I am more than happy to answer.
Beautiful. So before we dive into the book, can you tell our listeners kind of more about you and what inspired you to be an author?
Yes. So I grew up in a small farming town in Idaho.
Okay.
And it was one of those towns where you knew everyone, and
Yep.
you've got to make your own fun.
Yep.
You have to create your own fun, which was great because that was my first experience with creativity and being creative. And my mom was one of those ladies that she saved every birthday card that I made for her, from first and second grade on, all my trophies. And one of the things that she saved was the stories that I wrote,
Sure.
starting in second grade. And so I learned early on that I love telling stories.
Sure.
I love being able to share stories that have the opportunity or the ability to make people think, to teach people things, to give them the spine tingling chills. And I just love telling stories. And the older that I got, that desire or that love of writing kind of grew. When I was 8, I set a goal that I wanted to write something. It was a lifetime goal that I wanted to write something that was published. It only took over 40 plus years to do it. but I did it,
Yeah.
and it's 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 a story that is it's a true account of my personal experience. The other book that I've already written the screenplay for that, and I'm adapting it to a book now. That is also a true experience of and another crazy twisted story. I learned throughout, growing up that I was one of those people that weird, crazy things happen to,
Sure.
and I've learned to lean into that and
Mhm.
to embrace it because once I get past the trauma or the experience of that, it turns into a great story. And
Yep.
like this particular story, I wanted this story to educate and to teach people the things that they could learn from my mistakes so they don't find themselves in the same situation that I was in. That's the book.
So that is also a good segue to my next question, which is what real life experience kind of inspired Marked by the Ouija and kind of how did it shape the story?
So that's a great question that I love answering because I mentioned I grew up in a small town in Idaho. I also grew up in the town was is it's conservative. I grew up in a Mormon household, and so fast forward to me writing the book. It still shocks me. It still surprises me that I wrote this book and that I had this particular experience, considering the environment I grew up in. But
Sure.
this experience is based on my personal experience with a Ouija board, and everything in the book is true. I obviously had to change a couple of things to protect the people involved,
Sure.
and there is the part about the sheriff is something that I added to the book. I suspect that's true, but I can't prove it. So, but I put it in there
Sure.
because it did relate to the story and it kind of tied a lot of things in. So this experience is it was very important to me that when I wrote it, it was accurate
Mhm.
and it was it was true.
Mhm.
And so, I've had there's been a lot of people that have actually have read it, and my niece, she's a huge true crime enthusiast. She is going to love this podcast, and she's probably going to be one of your top fans here she's obsessed with it. And when she read this book, I mean, she's heard the story many times before. And
Mhm.
when she read it, she had to break it up into three different sessions, I guess you could say, because it still freaked her out.
Sure. Yeah.
And she'd heard the story many times. I still get goosebumps when I talk about the story, and I've told the story, thousands of times and talked about it, and still, all this time, it still gives me goosebumps. I mean, and I want it to give the readers goosebumps, but I also want them to get something out of it. I want them to to know that this book or that this Ouija boards are not toys,
Mhm.
and that there is very real power there. And so I want people to learn from my mistakes, but also, as a side note, and this goes into your long-winded answer
No,
to
no
your
worries. Yeah.
question, as far as experience, when I started promoting the book, when it was getting ready to launch, I spoke with thousands of people around the world, whether it was at the shows that I was going to or it was via social media. And one of the things that really surprised me about this entire experience was I wrote this book not knowing how it was going to be received.
Sure.
When you talk about paranormal, when you talk about the occult, and when you talk about Ouija boards, it has some very strong opinions.
Mhm.
And I wasn't sure how, you know, how it would be received. And I was really surprised to get death threats.
Oh, geez. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, I got that took me by surprise. I didn't expect that. I the other thing that surprised me was, it is my as you mentioned in the bio is my breakout novel. It's my first one that was actually published. And when you publish a book, you're vulnerable. You put it out
Mhm.
there, and you've got to stand by what you put out there. And I absolutely, I do. When I got those death threats, I it freaked me out. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
I spent a couple of weeks looking over my shoulder and making sure I wasn't being followed. And and then I came to the conclusion. I started, one day I was sitting there thinking about all of these people that I've been talking to that have had that have shared their experiences with me and their stories with me, others that have had true, authentic experiences. And, I thought, I didn't write this book for the people that were giving me death threats.
Sure.
I wrote this book for for myself.
Mhm.
I had a lot of guilt over the experience, so I wrote it for myself. But the more I talked to people that have shared their personal experiences, I realized that they don't have a safe space where they can actually talk about their experiences.
Mhm.
They're judged, they're humiliated, they're bullied.
Mhm.
There's been several cases where they have been ostracized by their family and friends because they tried to share their experience. And that's a very lonely place,
Yeah.
where you're being forced to be invisible. And you've got this very traumatic experience, and you can't talk about it, and that
Mhm.
affects so many aspects of your life. So when I got these death threats, and I thought, oh, do I want to take the book back to it, and I thought, you know what, I want to be a voice for these people.
Mhm.
I believe that the more you talk about it, the less of a stigma it has.
Yep.
And the more people talk about it, then it opens up opportunities for millions of people that have had these experiences, that have felt lost and invisible and forced to stay in the shadows and not being able to talk about something that has been such a monumental a part of their life. I wanted to write the book for them. And it's been nice that I've been able to, not intended, but
Yep.
it seems like I've created a safe space for these people to share their stories, and that is the most important thing to me. And it's something I'm extremely proud of. That whole experience of learning their experiences, and being able to be a voice for them and to stand up for them. And I'm hoping that more people, the more that we talk about it,
Mhm.
and people like yourself, Lindsay, that you open up your podcast and your shows to be able to talk about this. I mean, that's huge.
Yep.
And I want to thank you personally for myself, for being able to provide a platform to share this, but also for the people that are hearing it, because hopefully they'll get something out of it. They'll get, if they haven't played with a board or used a board and they want to, hopefully, you know, I haven't played with it since this experience. I
Oh,
don't
sure.
advocate use of the board, but if everyone has their own choice, and there's a lot of people I've talked to that haven't had an experience that want one. I always advise them, read the book and learn about it before you just pick it up and do it, because
Yep.
there are certain rules and protocol that are there to help keep the users safe.
Yep.
And that's really, one of the things I really want this book to do is, I don't want anyone else to have the same experience I had. That's a
Yep.
long-winded answer to your question.
No, but it's a good one because it provides context for the book. And you're right, like, it's, as someone who has had paranormal experiences myself, like, I know how, kind of, to your point, like, how lonely you can feel when you're, like, is this someone that I can tell my story to, or are they just kind of going to be like, yeah, that's a nice story that you're telling, but it's not real, and
Yeah.
to kind of poo poo your personal experiences. And it's like, well, what would I have to gain by making up a story like that? And why would I make up that sort of trauma for myself? Like it just, yeah. So I
Yeah.
completely
You know,
understand.
and people, in general, I mean, all of us do it at different levels. But when people, generally speaking, don't understand something, or if they haven't been through something, then they're skeptic,
Yep.
and I believe even the believers, myself included, I'm in that category. you know to get to be a believer, it's a process, and that process starts with skeptics.
Yep.
I don't think anyone starts just believing everything.
Yep.
If you haven't had that experience, then and like you said, you know that you learn quickly who you can share your story with, and who you can't.
Yep.
And unfortunately, there's far more that you can't share it with, that just don't understand. Even people that are very close to you,
Hmm.
that support you in so many different ways. It's one of those things, as you know, that unless you've experienced it, or not just the same thing, but just some aspect of it,
Yep.
it can be very debilitating. There was a guy that I talked to at a show that I did a couple of gosh, now it's been probably coming up on 2 months ago, and he shared an experience with me that happened. When he was 4 or 5,
Hmm.
his uncle played with a board in their house. He didn't play with it, but it was in their house,
Oh,
and
geez. Yeah.
his uncle played with it. He is now 55 years old, and he shared a story that he has not told his children. His wife knows, but he keeps it quiet, and he ignores it. But his personal experience, was something attached to him
Okay.
that has been with him for 50 years.
Wow.
And yeah, and he shared with me that he didn't tell his wife. He was just closed his eyes, stuck his head in the sand, hoping it would go away. And
Hmm.
when his wife found out, it was because he was talking in his sleep.
Okay.
And when he was, yeah, and his voice is very calming. It
Hmm.
was very calming. And he shared with me, his wife was at that show,
Okay.
but he stopped, and she's like, I'm sorry. She's like, nothing against you. I don't want to talk to you. I'm Catholic. I just don't want, I don't want anything to deal with this. And
Sure.
then, so he sent her along the way and down the aisle, and he waited, and he watched and waited till she got far enough away. And then he shared the story with me. But in his night terrors, or his dreams, his voice was very gruff, he said, was just not his regular voice. And he was
Sure.
talking in a language that he or his nor his wife had ever heard before. And he didn't believe it, because he's tried to package it away and box it up and hide it from himself and everyone else, until she recorded it and played it. And
Okay.
yeah, so then he was actually going to go home and get the recording. It wasn't on his phone, and he was going to bring it back, and unfortunately he didn't do it. But that's what I was kind of referring to, is that everyone's experiences are varied, and the
Hmm.
severity is varied, but it still doesn't take away the fact that it is a experience of the unexplained,
Hmm.
of it's mostly frightening. I have talked to some people that have not had a bad experience, which is very rare. But you know I, that's one of the things that, I mentioned earlier that I'm proud of, is that, is creating, and I didn't plan it, but creating this a safe space for people to talk about it,
Mhm.
you know.
Whether intended or not, would you agree that the Ouija board is almost kind of like the main character in the telling?
That was the first time I've been asked that question, and it was an awesome question. Absolutely, absolutely, it is. So in my experience, I was 16. I small town in Idaho. I found this board in the game section. At that point, it was owned. It was either by Parker Brothers, or
Sure. Yeah.
it was a cardboard with a plastic planchette.
Yep.
I mean, I'm like, oh, it's a game. I'd heard the stories, but you know, I didn't. Being a skeptic, I didn't believe it.
Mhm.
And so I had it in my room, and I was working one night. It was a Sunday night or Sunday, and my friends were at the house waiting for me to get home. And they started snooping around the room. They got bored and found it and started playing with it. And they had their own experience. And the experience that they had, that's in the book, that
Mhm.
from Nathan and Jason in the book, that is the exact experience that they had,
Oh,
that they
wow.
shared with me. And it was very traumatic, and it scared them so much that they ended up burning the board. But to this day, they will not have anything to do with me. It has scared them so much that, I haven't reached out in years, but
Sure.
and I won't now. But it 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 made them believers, and I lost some friends over it,
Mhm.
in more ways than one. As I lost my other friend because he lost his life as a direct threat, as a result of a direct threat from the board. So, with the main character being the board, that's what this entire experience was based on. And I had never in a million years would I think that something like this would have happened. I mean, this experience lasted over 12 hours. It includes an unsolved mystery. The guy we were talking to, Peter, he said I did use his name and his sister's name, but
Okay.
everyone else, I changed the names. But Peter was asking for our help,
Mhm.
and we didn't understand. And what I found out later on was, when my friends were having their experience, the experience before I got a chance to use it, Peter was also asking for help for his sister, Chastity.
Mhm.
And I think that that's the reason that things got so crazy when we were using it a week later, is because he kept asking for help to help his sister, and it just kept, no one was listening.
Sure.
And I felt guilty for years. I thought that, this was my board, and my friend Trent in the book lost his life because of it. And it it took a toll on me. I was homeless for a while. I got into a phase where I was just making bad decisions, and thank goodness I was able to pull it together and get out of it. But when I was writing the book, it was very therapeutic for me,
Sure.
and it was important that I have everything true and about it. And when I was writing it, that was a huge help for me personally to get over the guilt that I felt, because I understood why Trent was marked, why
Mhm.
my friend was marked, which is where the title of the book comes from. But yeah, it's a crazy story, and the main character is the board, and is Peter, and what he was trying to do. And I I don't think it was. I think it could have went very, very different had we reacted different or
Sure.
responded different,
Sure.
or had Trent. in the book, had he not burned the board,
Yeah.
I think things would be very different. But, you know, they happened, and that's why I'm trying to help other people so the same thing doesn't happen to them.
Yep.
They don't have a bad experience.
Yep. So kind of piggybacking off of that, like, what do most people get wrong about using a Ouija board? And I mean, obviously, you discuss some of the risks that can come from it in your book. Like that's kind of the whole premise of the book is just how dangerous it can be. But to that kind of, what do people, when they're using it, what sort of mistakes can be made as a result of kind of not really truly understanding how to properly use it?
Thank you for asking that question, because I think, again, from the people that I've talked to that have had experiences, and also those that haven't, that just seem to be drawn to the board for whatever their purpose is, I think it's important for them to recognize what their purpose is for using the board, and as well as the safety precautions for that.
Yep.
So there is a protocol, and there's nothing that's going to protect you completely
Sure.
if you choose to do it. However, there are certain rules. We've laid out 13 rules, and we actually did it's called a Ouija safety guide. And for everyone that signs up, and subscribes to my Substack account, they can actually download a copy of that Ouija safety guide. And from my experience, the reason that we did that is because there were so many people that wanted to do it, and we wanted to make sure that they knew the protocol, that they
Yep.
knew those steps. And as a site, there's other projects that have come out from this book, and one of them is we have been interviewing for the past probably 4, 5, 6 months. We've been interviewing others that have had personal experiences, and what I've found out from them is everyone, 100% of everyone that I've talked to, that has never had a bad experience using the board, they followed that protocol and those rules 100%, and
Okay.
they've never had a bad experience. However, on the flip side, for everyone that, and again, 100%, including myself, for everyone that has not followed those rules 100%, every single one of them have had a bad experience. So some of the big ones are, most people know that you should never use a Ouija board alone.
Yep.
But some of the other ones that are extremely important is when you use the board, always respect it.
Yep.
It's not a game. Right now Hasbro owns the rights to Ouija. They have the copyright, and they're the ones selling the board, and it's listed as a game for ages 8 years and up, which it just completely blows my mind.
Yeah.
But the one of the other rules that is crucial is, when you do use it, if you do, then always end the session by saying goodbye.
Yep.
You close out that session, because if you don't, you run the risk, a very high risk, of leaving that session open, which means it could be, depending on what happens during that session or that experience, it could open portals. It could, things can attach. You don't want that. You want
No.
to protect yourself in every way. So another important rule that a lot of people don't know, and I'm going to wrap two of these into the same one,
Sure.
because I think they're they're similar, is you should never use a board when you're vulnerable, when you're angry, when you're sad, when you're sick, because the reason for that is it's very easy to contact the other side. They want contact with us so bad that they will latch on and hold on with everything they have to be able to have some type of contact with the living.
Sure.
And so when if it's a malevolent or an evil, demonic spirit or entity, then it will, the weaker you are, the stronger it becomes.
Yep.
And like the guy that I mentioned that had his uncle used it in their house, you know and he's been living with it for 50 years. He didn't even use it. He
Hmm.
wasn't part of, but his uncle, I suspect, obviously I wasn't there, but I suspect that his uncle did not close out that session
Sure.
and left it open. And so other people that did not engage in that activity were affected. And now it's affecting not only his entire life, it's affecting his marriage, his kids. It will affect his grandkids and his relationships with them. So, being, closing out that session and being strong when you if you choose to do it, and not be vulnerable, is very important. The other aspect, or the other side of it, is be respectful.
Hmm.
Don't you know don't ask, hey, what are the lottery numbers?
Yeah.
And, that's not, that's not a good reason to use it. Most people use it to connect with a loved one that's passed, but even then, you don't know if you're actually speaking with your loved one.
Yep.
There are some things that you can, if you ask some very specific questions that only that loved one would know. I mean, you can probably narrow it down, but you can never be completely sure. So you know, for just as a whole, is always say goodbye, never be vulnerable, never use it when you're vulnerable or sick or angry or upset. Always respect the board. That's really where what happened in my situation is the board was disrespected,
Yep.
and it was disrespected in a major way. And that's why my friend lost his life.
I'm glad that you brought that up because it's very easy to misinterpret some of the conversations that you can have with a board. And I feel like it's very easy for, we'll just say, demonic forces to mimic and feed off of whatever you're putting forth to try and latch on because they want to
Yeah.
feed off of, your fear or your high emotions that you may be your heightened emotions that you may be feeling at the time that you are using it. Any high or low emotion that they can latch on to your point, gives them strength.
It's energy that, yeah. And to your point, if it is a demonic entity, it's not going to use that energy in a good way.
Yes.
So make sure that they don't even get the opportunity to 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 feed off that energy by being strong and content. Again, if you choose to use it.
Yep. As we kind of start to kind of wind down the interview, I mean, you mentioned before you do more than just write books. Can you tell our listeners a little more about your screenwriting career and kind of what you're working on?
Absolutely. So that is another crazy, twisted story, which is why I started the company Twisted Tales.
Sure.
So that story is, again, this is perfect for a crime podcast because that story is about true crime. So, are you familiar with? I'm sure you are. Robert Durst.
Yes.
Yeah. So for those who, most people have heard his name, but not everyone knows why.
Yep.
Robert Durst is from New York. His father started a company which is the largest, even today, is the largest commercial real estate firm in New York City. And obviously, it's been extremely successful. Robert Durst was one of Seymour Durst, his dad, one of his sons, and he took a very different path. Robert Durst is a convicted serial killer.
Yep.
And this is now going on about 17 years ago. I was backpacking in the Grand Canyon with two friends of mine. It was a married couple. And we were doing a 5-day backpacking trip. And the first 3 days were at Phantom Ranch at the bottom of the Grand Canyon.
Sure.
And our first night there, I ran into this man that I thought, wow, this guy is cool. I mean, he's interesting. He was eccentric. We were down there. That it was Christmas Day that I met him,
Okay.
and so it was winter, and the only thing he had on was a purple, blue, and white tracksuit, which I thought was odd,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because it's winter. Granted, we're several miles below the rim, and
Yep.
it wasn't as cold as it was up there, but it was still chilly, of course.
Yep.
But the more I got to know him, the crazier things got, until he tried to kill my friend and I because he wanted my friend's wife. And
Cool.
yes, it was. And I didn't realize who it was until years later. I was telling a friend of mine, she's a director in Los Angeles, and I was telling her the story, and we pulled out her laptop, and she said, this really sounds like Robert Durst. And she had to explain to me who he was.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started doing some research, and I even went when he killed Susan Berman and he was on trial for Susan Berman. It was after he had killed Morris Black in Galveston and cut up his body and put it in 5 garbage bags and threw it in Galveston Bay. The next morning, everything popped up except for his head. And he was caught for that, but he was eventually acquitted for not only the murder, but also mutilation of the body, which I don't understand how that happens,
Yeah.
because it was he claimed self-defense in both cases. So
Yeah.
after that, Susan Berman, who was his best friend, and she knew where the body of his first wife was buried,
Okay.
and she was running out of money and wanted to stay in her house in Beverly Hills, and so she started blackmailing him and saying, "Look, I'm going to talk to the police if you don't pay up,"
Yep.
basically. And as a side note on Susan Berman, is her dad was one of the first mobsters that started Las Vegas.
Okay.
Yeah, it was really, really interesting. And so after Robert Durst was in Galveston and he was acquitted for that, he took off to go take care of the loose ends with Susan Berman. And my friend and I, when we were researching this, we saw that his trail disappeared in around Albuquerque, which is right next to the Grand Canyon, and it
Mm-hmm.
disappeared for a month. So my experience for that particular experience, when I met this guy, like I said, I thought he was cool. I mean, I just really was fascinated by it. So
Good.
I love nature. I love animals. I love everything about nature.
Yep.
And when he told me that I was the first person that he had seen or talked to in a month, I was like, wow, this guy is like, he is the real deal. He is amazing. And
Yep.
so I asked him, I wanted to find out that the 2 animals that I really wanted to see on that trip, one was the California condor, which is, in the Grand Canyon. It's one of the
Yep.
only places that and the other is a certain type of bighorn sheep. And the only place that bighorn sheep, that particular kind of the bighorn sheep in the world is in the Grand Canyon, but they're very elusive. So
Sure.
with him being there for a month, and he was saying that I was the first person that he'd seen or talked to in a month. I thought, oh my gosh, if you've been down here a month, then you've clearly seen a condor.
Yeah.
And so I asked him about that, and I'm not making this up.
Okay.
So he when he said you're the first person I've seen or talked to in a month, and I said, oh well, then you've clearly seen a condor. And I said, I really really want to see one. And he closed his eyes and he stretched out his arms like they were wings, and he started, bent his knees, and he started moving around like he was flying. And he's like, oh, they're amazing, they're magical. And he's telling me all these facts about the condor that he has personally watched. And it was I mean, I was all in. And
Yep.
then he talked about when they come in to, because they live in caves in cliffs, and he talked about how, because their wingspan is so big, they bring their wings in and they go and land inside the cave. So he's telling me all this, and I'm like, wow, this guy is amazing. He told me his name was Mark, so I nicknamed him Condor Mark. And yeah, that was his nickname. And then I said, well, what about the bighorn sheep? And have you seen one of those? And he said, oh yeah, I have. He said, that feeling you get when you're being watched? I'm like, yeah. And he said, well, my wife and I were hiking, and I got that feeling, and I looked over my shoulder and I saw this big adult bighorn sheep, this female bighorn sheep. And he put his arms out in front of him like he's carrying something, with his elbow right at his belly button. And he said, she had bazungas out to here. Oh, yeah. Oh, it gets better. And then he said, and I would have tried to suck him if my wife wasn't there.
Oh my God.
He said that. I'm like, I'm like, what? And I'm like, what did he just say? And it took me a few moments to, like,
Process it.
yeah, exactly. And I thought, I'm like, well, wait a second. You just told me that I was the first person that you've seen or talked to in a month, but you just mentioned your wife. Where's your wife? And he thought what he said was funny. I think he was making a joke, but I 100% believe he thought that. So he was laughing. He's like, don't you ever talk about my wife? You better not tell anyone about my wife. And if you do, you're not going to live you're not going to live to regret it. I mean, he snapped
Wow.
like that. Yeah.
Wow.
And it, 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 I stepped back. I'm like, whoa, calm down. I mean, like, I thought that we were friends. And so I kind of distanced myself from him. Well, I have a short memory. And the next day I saw him again, and I introduced him to my friends, and I'd made some other friends down in the canyon as well. And he said some really creepy things to my friend's wife, and his mannerisms, the way he was acting, was just, you knew something was not right.
Yep.
And so I, kind of steered clear, but we were down in Phantom Ranch for 3 days, and I saw him again. And, it's one of those things. It's like, you never know. I mean, he looked like a harmless guy,
Yep.
but by the way he was acting around my friend, and the way he snapped when I asked about his wife, you just know you probably shouldn't ask too many questions. So
Sure.
my friend and I were doing the last hike, and on the last day that we were in Phantom Ranch, and we were up on this overlook trail, and that's where he just, I swear, he just materialized. Because I don't know if you've been to the Grand Canyon
Yep.
or you've done hiking, but so you know that there are no guardrails on the side of the trail.
Yes.
And that trail will do switchbacks all the way back up, and you can look when you're on a pretty much any trail, you can look back and see almost the entire trail and all the switchbacks, and you can tell if someone's following you. And
Yep.
we stopped repeatedly, and to look down, because my friend's wife chose not to go with us. She wanted to stay and read. So but she was in a very specific area. So we would stop occasionally, and we'd look over the edge, and we'd see her in her little powder blue coat, and there was nobody following us. And all of a sudden, we were about an hour and a half, 2 hours up on this trail, and there was Condor Mark. And that's when he tried to kill us. And we obviously got away.
Yep.
But that experience, is just, I mean, I don't even know how, I didn't know how to process it. And so I wrote a screenplay about it.
Yep.
Because in many cases, the truth is a lot crazier than something that someone made up.
Yep.
So I wrote a screenplay, kind of taught myself how to do it, and it actually got it was a finalist in the Atlanta International Screenplay Awards. And then it sat there for a while. I didn't know what I was doing, so I ended up getting a book coach. And I thought, you know what, I'm gonna write, I'm gonna adapt that screenplay to a book, and that's what I'm in the process of doing right now. And once I get that done, then we're going to release both of those at the same time. But it's another, much like Mark by the Ouija, I want the story of Phantom Ranch to be authentic. I want it to be true, and it's very important to me that the facts in that are true.
Sure.
Obviously changing the names of the people involved, but
Yeah.
yeah, that's another crazy story that I even went to Robert Durst's trial when he was on trial for killing Susan Berman, and I was the only civilian, I guess you could say, that they allowed into the trial. I mean, it was a media circus. It was
Sure. Yeah.
insane. And I sat on the first row right behind him. At one point, he turned around and he was within 3 feet of me. He turned around and looked right at me. And I mean, even now I still get goosebumps, but I looked at him, and by this point, I'm not afraid of him anymore. And I looked at him. I'm like, do you remember me? Condor? I didn't say this, but I'm looking at him like, do you remember me? Because I remember you.
Yep.
And, it was, I the other thing about that story, and it's all in the book and the movie, is clearly he started the hike, or he started in the Grand Canyon with his wife, with
Yep.
a new wife, but she disappeared. Where'd she go?
Yeah.
And I believe that I may know where she is. And so when I was at the trial, I told a bailiff, I said, look, I think that there's at least one, maybe two more victims that no one knows about. And I said, I need to tell somebody. And their families are wondering where they are. And so he's like, well, stay right here. I'm going to go get something for you to talk with. And he took off and came back. And about 30 minutes later, and it was a Friday afternoon. And he said, well, I don't have anyone, I couldn't find anyone that could come and talk to you right now, but come back Monday and, someone will talk to you. Well, that was Friday afternoon. COVID hit. And
Oh.
yes. And of course the trial shut down. And in the process, I moved from California, and so I wasn't there for the remainder of the trial, and I wasn't there to be able to share some. And so, this story is I not only a really hair raising experience, and it shows people a side of him that has never ever been recorded or talked about. And I want it to be some sort of closure for the family, because, like I said, I don't know her name, but there's the one that he talked about being his wife, but also he had some other gear that he he acquired somewhere. So
Okay.
I think he got it from another hiker. So I think that there's more victims. But that story, that book, we're looking at launching May of 2026.
Okay.
The movie, yeah, the movie, we actually have a couple of actors already committed for it, and we have a director for that. We're in the process of trying to get funding for it. Did you ever watch Mean Girls with Lindsay
Yes.
Lohan?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, classic, right?
Yep.
So one of the actors in that movie is the one who's playing me.
Okay.
Yeah, he was my first choice, and I'm thrilled that he accepted. So it's just a matter of when we can get the funding, and so we're planning on doing it with the book launch, to where and obviously with Mark by the Ouija, it's given me, and when it launched, it was a bestseller in 8 categories. It was a finalist for the 2025 Claymore Award with Killer Nashville. So, it's given me some credibility from someone that has never written a book, or written a book before, to, all right, now I've got a little bit of credibility. And so now I want to be able to release the big story,
Yep.
because that is a crazy, crazy story.
Wow. That is crazy. Oh my God. Yeah. I'm excited to read that because that's going to be, yeah, that sounds nuts. But
and and I've just that's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, there just the drive out with my two friends and myself. I mean, some crazy things happened that will still gives me goosebumps. So really, from beginning to end, that story is just a remarkable story that I can't believe that I lived through, because it was but here I am,
there you go.
and one of the best ways to deal with trauma is to talk about it and share your story. And so that's what I'm doing. And if I love storytelling and sharing things, and I love entertaining. So, I think that when people read this or watch this movie, hopefully they'll be able to see a different side of a serial killer that has not been reported about before. But also it will definitely give you goosebumps, and those the hair on the back of your neck standing
Yep.
up, and hopefully again, because education is so important. When they meet someone new that says some odd things that you know that could be a red flag, they take it as a red flag
Yep.
and kind of distance themselves from that person. So yeah, that's coming down down the pike in just a couple of months.
Wow. That's crazy.
It's
Well,
nuts, isn't it?
yeah, that's wow. Okay. I guess my last question is is there anything else that we didn't touch on that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Thank you for giving me that opportunity. So a couple of things when it comes to Mark by the Ouija. Like I said, I've talked to a lot of thousands of people that have had experiences, not had experiences. The ones that are dead set that they want an experience, please, if any of the listeners are one of those people or fall in that category, just please do your research.
Yep.
Sign up for Substack, get a copy of the Ouija safety guide, and follow those rules. Because yes, whatever your purpose is, if you want just the excitement of playing with something that this powerful, just protect yourself.
Yep.
So do that, because you don't want your curiosity to turn into something or result in something that is going to affect you in a negative way,
Sure.
not only on a short-term basis but a long-term basis. So do your research and figure that out. The other is, if you know somebody that has had an experience, and please give them an opportunity to share their experience with you. Because one of the biggest aspects of one of the biggest ways to for those of us who have had experiences, and share with me if this falls the same for you and your experiences. When you have that experience and you feel like you're invisible and you can't talk to anyone about it or share it, it bottles up, and it creates so many things. So, if for the listeners out there, if you know somebody that has had an experience, give them a safe space to talk about it,
Yep.
and you don't have to understand it. You don't have to ask questions if you don't want. Just give them a safe space where they can talk about it, because talking about it does help.
Yep.
And that's one of the big things about this book. And I've written a short film that I'm hoping to be able to get funding for that, to where we can actually get that out there as well. And that will help to get the conversation going, and hopefully take away that stigma. And then, we're actually in the initial stages of talking to Hasbro about doing a full length feature movie. Me personally, and this is just me talking, the other Ouija movies that have been out in the past are kind of cheesy to me. They
Yep.
don't seem like they're accurate,
Yep.
and this I want, I would love to write it to be able to share my experience on the screen again as a way to open up that dialogue for and take away that stigma so people can live happy, healthy, and productive lives.
Yep.
And if anyone has any, if they would like to share their story with me, please, they can go to my website at scottwellsauthor.com and they can actually share their story. That the other project, if they do have an experience, and for your
Yeah.
experience, your personal experience, we are in the process of interviewing people that have had personal experiences. So if you've had an experience and you are interested or you're open to talking about it on camera, I'd love to talk to you. I'd love to be able to hear your story, just to be able to give you someone to talk about it with. But if you want to share your story on camera, then we are recording those and they can reach out through the website or through my website or through any of the social media platforms, Instagram, YouTube. I've got two Facebook accounts, Twisted Tales Author or Twisted Tales and Scott Wells Author. Instagram is Twisted Tales Author, and then there's Substack, and I mean a whole variety. So get in touch with me if you want to share your story or if you just need someone to talk to. I'm there. I want to be able to help.
Beautiful. On that note, I would like to thank Scott for taking the time to join me today. And again, the book is Marked by the Ouija, available in ebook, paperback, hardcover, and audiobook. And like I said, we will have a link in the show notes so you can purchase a copy of your own in whatever format you prefer. Thank you again, Scott.
Thank you.
And on that note, as always, I'm Lindsay, and we'll see you next time with another tale as old as crime.